We're getting ready to play through the month of January, with the Milwaukee Bucks currently sitting at the top seed in the Eastern Conference. If the season ended today, we would be projected to pick up the #1 seed in the playoffs, and that was thanks in part to our superstar play from point guard Brandon Jennings so far this season. Despite his stellar play, he wasn't even in the top 5 considerations for the MVP award this season. So hopefully with another great month of play here in January, things can turn around for him and he can get in the conversation for the MVP award. If Brandon Jennings was going to win the MVP award, it wasn't just due to his scoring, but his passing as well. And just on cue, he would get things started with an assist to Dante Wooden. Why not make that 2 assists here in the first quarter, as he would find Wooden on the fast break again. And this duo of these two guards had been terrorizing the league for the last 3 seasons now. We had jumped up to an early 17-6 lead over the Cavaliers and only were extending it, as we just could not miss from anywhere beyond the arc here in the first quarter tonight. That would give us a 17-point lead headed into the second, and this lead looked like it was only going to continue to grow for us here in the second quarter. Once again, Brandon Jennings was showing off his court vision and our team's ability to shoot from the 3-point line, with Edward Marsh bringing the ball up, and this 3-pointer here would put us up by 22. It would take until a minute and a half left in the first half, but Cleveland would get their first 3 to fall, and they were hoping for another one here, but Gallinari's foot would be on the line, as we would head to halftime with an 18-point lead over the Cavaliers. While I was happy we were playing this well, it wasn't a surprise that we were winning by this much, as this week in our schedule we had some pretty easy matchups against lower tier teams like the Cavaliers. Honestly, I would be pretty worried if we weren't blowing them out like this, and even though they started to try to chip away at this lead here in the fourth quarter, the closest they would ever get here in the fourth quarter would only be 14 points, and we would walk away with this dominant double-digit victory here at home, with Dante Wooden shooting a perfect 5 for 5 from behind the 3-point line tonight. All of a sudden, we found ourselves 1-2 the next week following that win against Cleveland, and we were getting ready for a matchup against the Memphis Grizzlies, who were the top team in the Western Conference, led by an extremely deadly duo of Rudy Gay and OJ Mayo, both averaging over 20 points a game. The Grizzlies were dominating in the Western Conference the same way we were dominating the East, as they had the exact same record as us headed into this matchup tonight. And with the Western Conference currently being much tougher than the competition in the Eastern Conference, if they had the same record as us against better teams, that definitely meant it was going to be a tough matchup. Both teams were continually trading back and forth buckets and the lead here throughout the first quarter, but with only 3 seconds left and down by 1, Brandon Jennings would get one last shot off for us, sending us into the second quarter with a lead, and we were trying to extend it now. The largest our lead would get up would be 5 points, but Memphis was still fighting their way in the game, getting it back down to only a 3-point deficit against us headed into halftime. They would manage to get it down to 1 here in the third quarter, as Brandon Jennings would find Dante Wooden wide open for 3, and if you're the Grizzlies defense, there is no way that you can be leaving Dante Wooden open like that. The lead hadn't changed much throughout the third quarter though, as Rudy Gay would get one last bucket for the Grizzlies. In what was a 3-point lead for us headed into the fourth was now a 1-point deficit. The Grizzlies would take a lead, and even despite their best efforts now defending Dante Wooden, he would still knock down shots, with not 1 but 2 3-pointers in a row for us, now giving us a 3-point lead with less than a minute to go in the game, but the Grizzlies weren't far behind at all. We would get it back to a 5-point game, but Mike Conley would hit the shot with a hand in his face, bringing it to a 2-point game, but for some reason we're letting Brandon Jennings run so much time off the clock, finally sending him to the free throw line though, and with Brandon Jennings hitting both of his free throws at the line for us, that late 3 from the Grizzlies just wasn't enough, as we would manage to run out the rest of the clock, and we would pick up this win in what could be a potential future NBA Finals matchup this season. Once again, Brandon Jennings was a key contributor for us with almost a double-double, but after beating a team like Memphis, I don't know how we could drop a game by double digits to a team like the Bobcats. Despite our up and down month of January, we were still at first place in the Eastern Conference, and we were looking to continue to hold on to that spot here at home again, taking on another Western Conference opponent in the Hornets. Even though this team was middle of the pack in the Western Conference standings, that didn't mean they were going to be an easier matchup just because of how tough the Western Conference was this season. Realistically, they would have been a top 5 team if they were in the Eastern Conference, and so far throughout the first quarter tonight, they were proving just how tough they actually could be. Down by 4 with 10 seconds left to go in the first quarter, they would go down to the low post and make this a 2-point game, but that would be just enough time for Edward Marsh to bring the ball up and throw up this 3-pointer, as our third-year point guard would give us a 5-point lead headed into the second quarter, but was not getting it off to a great start for us with this turnover. Thankfully, we would look to Dante Wooden to try to turn the tides here here for us in the second quarter, and then Edward Marsh would try to make up for that turnover with a 3 of his own. Despite all this offense we were generating, our lead had only grown by 2 points here at the end of the second, and it was right back to 5 headed into halftime against New Orleans. 2.5 minutes into the third quarter, and we would finally see our lead jump up over the Hornets to double digits, and with no signs of slowing down on offense throughout the third, it looked like our lead was going to continue to grow. It had been a quiet night so far for Dante Wooden, but he had hit a couple of clutch threes for us. But whenever he seemed to do that, Chris Paul seemed to answer right back for New Orleans. The Hornets would knock down one last three-pointer here headed into the fourth quarter, getting it down to only a 10-point deficit here as David West would finally cut it down to single digits for New Orleans. There wasn't much time left in this game, but it could be close if we kept leaving them open for 3. With 33 seconds left, down by 7, Chris Paul would drive the lane and would draw the foul. And after knocking down his first free throw, he would make the second to make it a 5-point game, but New Orleans for some reason would leave a wide open bucket for Brandon Jennings to attack, and just for safety measures, he would throw up one more three-pointer to make this a 10-point lead. And even though it looked like it was going to come down to the wire, we would end up winning this one over the Hornets by double digits, thanks to yet another phenomenal performance by Brandon Jennings, putting up 19 points and 8 assists. Our last 10 games hadn't been the greatest stretch of the season so far, as we were only 6-4, but we were still thankfully holding on to the top seed in the Eastern Conference. Our last game for the month of January was back home against the Chicago Bulls, and we would get this game started with a fast break 3 from Lonnie Roberts. Potential All-Star and MVP candidate this season, Derrick Rose had his offense running effortlessly though, as it was a physical battle here early on between both of these teams. Derrick Rose would find the ball down low on the right post and give his team the first lead of the night, but we would close the first quarter out by taking it right back from this three-pointer from Dante Wooden. Despite being much better than them on paper, we had still yet to pull away from the Bulls on the scoreboard, as we were only up by 2 with just over a minute and a half to go here in the second quarter. Edward Marsh would look to extend that lead headed into halftime with this three-pointer at the buzzer, but he couldn't get it to fall, and it would only be a 2-point lead headed into half. Up by 7 now, we found our lead extending as Dante Wooden would reach it to double digits, but Derrick Rose was still doing his best to keep his team in the game. Rose had got it down to only a 4-point deficit as this three-pointer would make it 1, but we would answer right back with a 3-point play of our own from Andrew Bogut in the paint. Headed into the fourth quarter, it was still a closely contested game as the Bulls were within 1 point of us, and then it would be Carlos Boozer pulling up from the left elbow to give them their first lead of the quarter, with Ronnie Brewer on the fast break looking to extend it to 3 points, and he would do just that, completing the and one play and making it a 4-point lead for Chicago. With just over a minute to go, this game was still within reach for us, as Dante Wooden would tie it up with that three-pointer right there and was looking to take the lead back with this one, but it was far from over as Derrick Rose would answer right back with one of his own, giving us under 10 seconds and an opportunity to take the last shot of the game, but we would leave just enough time on the clock for the Bulls to take one last shot as Derrick Rose from deep would be off the mark, and we would manage to end the month of January with a win here at home over the Bulls, thanks to an almost perfect night from Dante Wooden from beyond the arc. That would bring us to the month of February, where we would pick up next episode, and despite his great play throughout this month, Brandon Jennings was still nowhere near the MVP voting list, but at least had a chance to find himself playing in the All-Star game next month.